the process of overthinking is just, it's one of those things that makes our job, sometimes a little bit more psychological, right? The psychological aspect of it that keeps us from getting things done quickly. And I think when you work in front of people, it can help you overcome that a little bit. But that being said, another part, it's kind of the opposite too. Like when I try to teach mixing and mastering and I talk about it as I'm doing it, that in essence makes me think differently than when I would actually mix and master on my own time. So the whole point of this, I'll explain a little bit what's going on here. For some of you that were here last time, you kind of know my workflow a little bit. But for those of you that are new, I'll explain a little bit what's going on. And then I'm basically going to work. So, 20 or 30 minutes, I'm just going to go. You can, if you want to pop a question in the chat, you're more than welcome to. Corey is actually here to help out. So he's going to help sort of field those questions. But keep them in mind, and then I'll take a break, and then we'll actually talk about them. And if I don't have any questions from you guys, I'll just kind of go through and what I can remember of what I did, I'll explain some things about that. So hopefully the experience will be you seeing me in action and sort of like how these decisions are made in real time, because I work fast. Yeah, one of my colleagues said it best one time. He was saying that, what we do is reactive. It's just you hear something and you react. So but we still have to have goals. Okay, without goals, you're kind of just doing it just for the sake of doing it. And I guess that's a kind of a good segue into what we're looking here on the screen. So we do have Ableton Live, right? That is my DAW of choice for basically anything that is not editing and recording. I love recording and editing in Pro Tools. I think it will always be superior for that, or at least for a while. So yes, I'm using Ableton Live for mastering. I use it for mixing. I use it for production. And that means that there's some things about live that you may or may not be familiar with, and then we'll talk about kind of the subject of goals and all that with your projects. But we have the tracks are here. You can see all my stuff is on the right, which you may not be used to. Faders, mutes, all that stuff. Basically, when I click on something, we'll see the inserts on the bottom row, okay, horizontally. So things like, these are collapsed subgroups, just like how you have folders in Pro Tools now, or, track stacks in Logic. But you can see that kind of opens up everything. So there's my instrumental, there's my vocals. And then we have the master chain down here, which I haven't selected yet. I'll do that live in front of you all. So yes, that's just a little bit about how the overview of Ableton works. So what I was saying about goals, and like you got to have a goal when you do stuff, otherwise you're kind of just doing it for yourself and you don't really ever know when to stop, and that can be a little frustrating sometimes. So what we have here, okay, this is a song from the upcoming album of an artist named Johnny Bad Luck. He's from Albuquerque, New Mexico, super talented. And he actually, if you follow him, it's spelled Jawny, Johnny, Jawny, Bad Luck. Follow him. He just posted the artwork for the project, and this is part of the 12-song album. And so, when you master an album, there's a consistency that you're going for. It's interesting because if you look at recent bigger projects, like Lil Nas X had a project where I think he had multiple mastering engineers. I thought that was interesting. I don't know how that kind of played into the whole idea of consistency, but it's not common, at least to my knowledge. But in this case, Johnny's using me to help create that consistency. So I'll talk first about consistency and then just about some of the goals with the project. So consistency-wise, we have the first mix and master that we did as a team here in the top. So this is the single Come Home, which I said is one of the projects on the album. You can see it's been gained down by 8 dB on the fader here because it's it's a loud master. So we gain it down so that way what we're working with initially is not overpowered, so I can have a fair comparison. The loudness will generally throw off your ability to compare. So so that is going to help us at least hear some type of goal. Okay, that song, when we worked on it, was compared to another song that was sort of the reference for that song, another professionally mixed and mastered track. Who was the artist, Corey, for Come Home? Who was the reference? That's all good. But I've used Black Bear as a reference. I've listened to Ariana Grande, like just any mainstream. I think Black Bear is actually a really good reference sonically for this project. Oh, the Kid Leroy, yeah. That was it was a single by him, so it was good. But still, like, that's the goal. And once we meet that goal, then I take that project and I basically use that to compare the other songs just to make sure that we're good in terms of quality, loudness. And that brings me to my next point, which was, the artist himself requested that we try to get this project to, and I love how he used the word depth, to the depth of professional projects. So that was an element that he was missing. It's sort of that, you have the x-axis, the y-axis, right? You have the height, you have the width, but then there's the depth, the z-axis, right? That's what he felt like he was missing in his project. So that's why he hired me and Corey to tackle his project after the mixing. So we're basically helping to add that sort of X factor, well, Z factor, if you will, and that is sort of where we're at. So I have Come Home up here, so you'll hear me jump back and forth to it. I have the pre-master, which is essentially the stereo version of what we have here. This is the stemmed out, we'll talk about that in a second, but that's the stemmed out version of the pre-master. I have the pre-master up here in case I do need to reference the original mix, just for, to make sure that I'm keeping the essence of the original mix in mind, because that was approved by the artist. I don't want to remix the song. I want to enhance the song. So yeah, so we have this for quality. Eventually this fader will end up going louder as we start limiting our master and getting louder. This will also get louder on this fader, so I can continue to make sure that I am hitting not just the, the depth and the quality and the feel, but also the loudness of that first one. So I think we have two more songs after this to finish up. So we've actually already done like about 9 songs, and they're all sounding like really, really good at this point. So the idea here is that we're on like song number 9 or 10, and all the other songs are already kind of like feeling just like Come Home. The whole project has that depth, has that loudness, and we're trying to get this there as well. So let's talk about what we're looking at here. We have the instrumental broken out. Corey actually had this as a really good idea, and I love how he asked for the deliverables for the project like this, where we actually have the kick drum stemmed out separately than the drums. So we have the full drum mix here, minus the kick, and then we have the kick drum here by itself. And then we have bass, and then we basically have we have a second bass line here. That's interesting, cool. So bass number 1, bass number 2, and then we have everything minus the drums and the bass here. So kind of a little bit more elaborate version of a stem mastering scenario, but nonetheless it gives us a little bit of extra control, so we can add that extra depth. And this is this is like a really cool way to go about it. It's not how we approach every project, but this project definitely we felt like that was the best approach. So then we have the vocals here. We have a backup stem, and when we have the lead vocal stem, and that's the deal. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to mute my microphone, and I'll pop it back on when I get when I need to talk again. I'll give you a heads up when That's the other thing too. Yeah, I kept talking as I mute my mic. The loudness is going to get louder, okay? When you see me pop up that limiter, I'm going to give everybody a heads up, because I just don't want you to blow out your ears if you're listening in headphones or something like that. Cool. Just letting folks in on Zoom. All right, so I'm going to mute my mic, and again, just understand that as I'm perfect. Thanks, Corey. I am going to be jumping back and forth. I'm not just going to listen to the whole song from beginning to end. I'm going to kind of jump in the middle. You're going to hear me pop to the reference. So it's going to be, a little crazy, but just understand that every time I listen to this top track, I'm referencing it for quality. And then, that's basically what I'm doing. So, all right, here we go.
Android.
Knowledge, I got you, homie. Say I wanted freedom, but what's really freedom? Say I wanted freedom, but what's really freedom when I've been caught lying and cheating and killing? The feeling of love, nothing can heal it. The wounds I've inflicted, ask God for forgiveness, but that don't heal wounds that I've cut in my victim. Kristen, my lover, now that shit is history. I don't deserve her, honestly I don't deserve her. She was an angel and I was a demon undercover. Living in a moment, running from the lonely. Head is on backwards, I can see the hindsight on all that. The timing ain't right, but I gotta get on this flight. You're the only one I can see as my wife. What the hell, I can't believe I lost my sight for a good woman. I can't believe it. She was everything that I ever needed. Hey, I regret not respecting you as a woman. I regret not appreciating what I had. I regret hurting never. Slept in 2 days just to make it here. Hit the bank, up the money and the flowers, yeah. I'm in a rush trying to get. What's really freedom when I've been caught lying and cheating and killing? The feeling of love, nothing can heal it. The wounds I've inflicted, ask God for forgiveness, but that don't heal wounds that I've cut in my victim. Kristen, my lover, now that shit is history. I don't deserve her, honestly I don't deserve her. She was an angel and I was a demon undercover. Living in a moment, running from the lonely. Head is on backwards, I can see the hindsight on all that. The timing ain't right, but I gotta get on this flight. You're the only one I can see as my wife. What the hell, I can't believe I lost my sight for a good woman for no reason. So selfish, baby, I can't believe it. She was everything that I ever needed. I regret not respecting you as a woman. I regret not appreciating what I had. I regret hurting every one of your feelings. All I could think about my mind a mile a minute. As I'm speeding in a Kia down on 101. I'm not sure where you're doing when you see me there. From that cliff where you throw me or leave me there. Either way, I don't know, I feel unprepared. Haven't slept in 2 days just to make it here. Hit the bank, up the money and the flowers, yeah. I'm in a rush trying to get to the spot. Caught him out of yacht, tell him to hurry before she arrives. I don't deserve her. Come home, come home, come. Now it's a demon undercover. Living in a moment, running from the lonely. Head is on backwards, I can see the hindsight on all that. The timing ain't right, but I gotta get on this flight. You're the only one I can see as my wife. What the hell, I can't believe I lost my sight for a good woman for no reason. So selfish, baby, I can't believe it. She was everything that I ever needed. I regret not respecting you as a woman.
Just watch your volumes. I'm about to start adding the limiter.
I don't deserve her, honestly I don't deserve her. She was an angel and I was a demon undercover. Living in a moment, running from the lonely. Head is on backwards, I can see the hindsight on all that. The timing ain't right, but I gotta get on this flight. You're the only one I can see as my wife. What the hell, I can't believe I lost my sight for a good woman. I don't deserve her, honestly I don't deserve her. She was an angel and I was a demon undercover. Living in a moment, running from the lonely. Head is on backwards, I can see the hindsight on all that. The timing ain't right, but I gotta get on this flight. You're the only one I can see as my wife. What the hell, I can't believe I lost my sight for a good woman for no reason. So selfish, baby, I can't believe it. She was everything that I ever needed. I regret not respecting you as a woman. I regret not appreciating what I had. I regret hurting every one of your feelings. All I could think about my mind a mile a minute. As I'm speeding in a Kia down on 101. I'm not sure where you're doing when you see me there. From that cliff where you throw me or leave me there. Either way, I don't know, I feel unprepared. Haven't slept in 2 days just to make it here. Hit the bank, up the money and the flowers, yeah. I'm in a rush trying to get to the spot. Caught him out of yacht, tell him to hurry before she arrives. Yes. I don't deserve her, honestly I don't deserve her. deserve her. She was an angel and I was a demon undercover. Living in a moment, running from the lonely. Head is on backwards, I can see the hindsight. Don't hold at the time, it ain't right, but I gotta get on this flight. Home, come home. I don't wanna be alone, so come home, come home, come. She was everything that I ever needed. I regret not respecting you as a woman. I regret not appreciating what I had. I regret hurting every one of your feelings. All I could think about my mind a mile a minute. As I'm speeding in a Kia down a 101. I'm not sure where you're doing when you see me there. From that cliff where you throw me or leave me there. Either way, I don't know, I feel unprepared. Haven't slept in 2 days just to make it here. Hit the bank, up the money and the flowers, yeah. I'm in a rush trying to get to the spot. Caught him out of she tell him to hurry before she arrives. Yes. I don't deserve her, honestly I don't deserve her. She was an angel and I was a demon undercover. Living in a moment, running from the lonely. Head is on backwards, I can see the hindsight. Don't hold at the time, it ain't right, but I gotta get on this flight. You're the only one I can see as my wife. What the hell, I cannot believe I lost my sight for a good woman for no reason. So selfish, baby, I can't believe it. She was everything that I ever needed. I regret not respecting you as a woman. I regret not appreciating what I had. I regret hurting every one of your feelings. All I could think about my mind a mile a minute. As I'm speeding in a Kia down a 101. I'm not sure where you're doing when you see me there. From that cliff where you throw me or leave me there. Running from the lonely. Head is on backwards, I can see the hindsight. Don't hold at the time, it ain't right, but I gotta get on this flight. You're the only one I can see as my wife. What the hell, I cannot believe I lost my sight for a good woman for no reason. So selfish, baby, I can't believe it. She was everything that I ever needed. I regret not respecting you as a woman. I regret not appreciating what I had. I regret hurting every one of your feelings. All I could think about my mind a mile a minute. As I'm speeding in a Kia down a 101. I'm not sure where you're doing when you see me there. From that cliff where you throw me or leave me there. I don't deserve her, honestly I don't deserve her. She was an angel and I was a demon undercover. Living in a moment, running from the lonely. Head is on backwards, I can see the hindsight. Don't hold at the time, it ain't right, but I gotta get on this flight. You're the only one I can see as my wife. What the hell, I cannot believe I lost my sight for a good woman for no reason. So selfish, baby, I can't believe it. She was everything that I ever needed. I regret not respecting you as a woman. I don't deserve her, honestly I don't deserve her. She was an angel and I was a demon undercover. Living in a moment, running from the lonely. Head is on backwards, I can see the hindsight. Don't hold at the time, it ain't right, but I gotta get on this flight. You're the only one I can see as my wife. What the hell, I cannot believe I lost my sight for a good woman for no reason. So selfish, baby, I can't believe it. She was everything that I ever needed. I regret not respecting you as a woman. There's some things that I did. Come home, come home, come home. Been undercover, living in a moment, running from the lonely. Head is on backwards, I can see the hindsight. Don't hold at the time, it ain't right, but I gotta get on this flight. You're the only one I can see as my wife. What the hell, I cannot believe I lost my sight for a good woman for no reason. So selfish, baby, I can't believe it. She was everything that I ever needed. I regret not respecting you as a woman. I regret not appreciating what I had.
All right. So that's my first pass right there. That was actually, yeah, that went really well. So basically, and are there any immediate questions about what I was doing? I'm sure there's a lot of questions about what I'm doing, but maybe I can just break it down for you unless there's any like immediate specific questions anybody wants to ask. That's right. That's right. I am in the zone. It's the best time. So yeah, let's let's break this down. Unless anybody has any specific questions. I hope the stream was going okay. The Zoom stream and the Audio Mover stream. Let me know if there's any issues there. I'll try to fix it. Cool. All right, so let's break this down, right? Okay, so you heard me. Come Home is a super cool song. Maybe I should start just playing stuff all the way through from beginning to end, but that's not how I save time. So you heard me listening to Come Home. You heard how it was big and it had a lot of depth and it was punchy and it was fat. And, that was my goal, right? And you can see that my fader right now on Come Home is at about minus 1.7, which means, I'm in the ballpark of the loudness. Like if this is at 0 and I hit play and what I'm mastering sounds just like that, then I'm basically, at the same loudness. So I'm close, all right? And the goal of, these streams is to get things about 95% there. And then we can, we work with the artist in that last 5% if we need to. So that was happening there. In the beginning, you heard me listen to this pre-master a little bit. And, one of the things about the pre-master, you may have even heard it initially and you were like, yeah, this sounds pretty good. Actually, it sounds kind of better than what Mark's working on. and like that's good because, the pre-master is the mixing in general, right, is a process of emotion. We're adding emotion, right? Big bass, like we want to feel it, and like and then the job of mastering is to control that energy to help us have that, the translation. Controlling the energy helps us. By energy, I mean like, in this case at least, a lot of low frequency energy. Controlling that energy helps us get things louder because the moment that low frequency energy hits that limiter, you hear it, it crushes everything. So we got to balance it. We got to balance that energy. So, that's sort of what we start balancing back a little bit as we start hitting the limiters, we start making things louder. So that's just in general, the big differences between the pre-master and what we're hearing right now. So let's kind of pull this apart from top down, okay? So initially I heard that bass and I was like, all right, let me control this bass. So I went into, initially I heard the sample in this stem here. And I brought up the Fab Filter Pro Q3, and I started controlling the high mids. Now, you may have noticed that I was using this here. See, it says mid. I'm not going to go too deep into what mid side is, but ultimately we are breaking up the stereo image into a middle. So imagine everything that's just down the middle, and then the other component of that is side. So you can see even the graphic here kind of outlines, all right? The middle is in the middle. The side is everything that is not in the middle, like the wides. So what I'm doing here is I'm actually reducing these high mid frequencies because I heard it in that sample that was a little harsh, and that could translate to a really harsh experience in other playback systems. And it actually will probably get harsher as we start limiting. So that just helps with that in general. And I'm going to listen to it again, and I may have to, there's no other part in the song where that's really occurring. So if it continues to be harsh, maybe I'll automate an EQ there or something. But ultimately, or initially, I should say, I am using something called dynamic EQ. That's why I clicked on this little menu here and I put, it said make dynamic. Now it's on it. So what that's doing is think of a compressor, but just in that range of frequencies, kind of like a multiband compressor, but it's a little bit different with EQ. It's kind of like automating an EQ based off of the incoming signal, and it's only in the middle. So what it's doing, and this is kind of good to understand now because you're gonna notice that I use mid-side everywhere, okay? And it's because of that word, that Z axis, that depth. That is the reason why mid-side is king when it comes to this stuff. And if you do it too much, things get weird. But if you do it just enough, you get depth. And so what I'm doing is I'm doing this in the middle channel, and it's leaving all of those high mids in the side. So we're actually not touching the stuff in the wide signal. We're just controlling it in the mono. And that's really where most of the energy is anyway. So it's actually just kind of like floating around in the sides, and it's not really something that's worth controlling. But this is going to add that depth as well as control that harshness. And then I did the same thing down here, but this is more of a muddiness. So there was a muddiness in that stem that I was sort of feeling. So I controlled that a little bit. You can see it's controlled a little bit less because it wasn't as muddy as this was harsh, if that makes sense. So that was a little bit about why I was controlling those low mids. You might have also noticed that the way I EQ, I don't boost to find the frequency. I cut so that I hear when the frequency is eliminated. And I do that because there's a psychology, and I don't want to like take away from anyone that's learning how to EQ, because I for years would boost, find the frequency, and then cut. But psychologically, when you do that boost, you kind of like fuck with your ears a little bit, and then that sort of, it's sort of like you basically would have to stop for a few seconds to let your ears reset and then do your EQ. So what I'm doing is I'm cutting initially to hear, oh, okay, I can hear that quality that I don't like go away completely, right? I'm doing an extreme version of it. And then I bring it back to taste. I balance it back in. So that's kind of like my general EQ technique that you'll see me using. So the bass, right? I'm not using dynamic EQ here, right? Not that moving EQ, but this is just regular old EQ. Stereo, in fact. Let's see. Yeah, just stereo EQ. And you see me controlling that sort of big bump in energy in the bass. And I'm balancing. That's all I'm doing. I'm not cutting. I'm not eliminating. I'm balancing. Sometimes you need to cut. Yeah. Sometimes are there overabundances of frequencies? Yeah, absolutely. Let me try to not spill water all over everything. Hold on. Oh yeah. So what question? So let me just finish my thought really quick, and then we'll address it. So yeah. So basically, we're controlling these frequencies by balancing them, just to where they're still there, right? But they're balanced, and that's the idea. Let's see what Daniel's question is. Why do you use TDR Nova when you could have used the Pro Q3? Is there something I missed? Because I think you just did dynamic EQing with it. Yeah, great question, man. Yeah, so TDR Nova, it's kind of like, I think it's funny when we have all these tools and then I go for the free plugin. It's almost like, I hope one day I get a Grammy and I have sausage fattener on the stereo bus, even though that's not free. It's still sausage fattener. I think that would be rewarding for some reason. But anyway, so TDR Nova, it's a free plugin. You can find it on just Google it, TDR Nova. Download it, install it. It's amazing. But Daniel's question is, why did I use that when I have Pro Q3, which is like, it's a paid plugin. Why? In fact, I think there's a higher version of TDR Nova that lets me do mid-side, and I don't even have that version. Well, for one, I did not need mid-side processing. I needed I just needed a stereo dynamic EQ. And let me just find where that was. I think I did on the instrumental. Yeah, there it is. So yeah, I mean, basically, Daniel, I did that because it's just an easy plugin to use. And actually, here's a point. There's no attack and release on the Pro Q3. It's kind of funny, right? Like there's threshold if you go into the advanced settings, but there is no attack and release. So, there's something about this interface that just felt kind of like easier at the time. That's all. Yeah. There's no sound difference, I don't think. I've never A-B'd the two together, but for some reason when I do the low-end control, I like using TDR Nova. And you could probably use a multiband compressor as well for that, and it would do similar things. Just something about, you could use like the Waves C6 if you have it, or C4. But yeah, so that's a good question, man. And that's basically my justification. There is no real reason. It's just that I like the interface of TDR Nova, and it works and sounds good. So let's keep going here. So we got our drums. Didn't do anything to the main drum stem. The kick drum definitely needed. I attenuated the low frequencies. Now I go all the way down to 30 hertz because I'm just trying to, I'm not trying to cut. I'm just trying to balance. And if you can imagine like those frequencies being slightly attenuated, I'm not cutting the low frequencies, but I'm balancing them back, because the more we limit, the more those low frequencies of the kick are going to start gelling with the sub bass, and it's going to create that distortion. So I'm doing this so that way the distortion kind of gets alleviated. It's a little bit cleaner, and the low end of the kick is still there, but the way it's interacting with the 808 is not overbearing. It's not super muddy. And a lot of these things can get fine-tuned as we get to that last 15, 10, 5% of the master, but this is just a starting point. I mean, we got there pretty quick. I'm pretty happy with what we did. So, and then on the kick drum, we got transient master, which, pulling back the sustain is another way to kind of control low end, because the sustain is sort of, right, it's lingering. So by pulling that sustain back a little bit, it's going to help the kick feel a little tighter. And by putting up the attack a little bit, it's going to help it feel a little punchier. And you did see me crank up the attack time because I just wanted to hear it working, make sure it's working. So yeah, just a little bit there, a little bit off of the sustain. I mean, that's actually a lot off of the sustain, but I didn't feel that was a lot. Now, if the producer or the artist was to be like, hey, did you do something to the kick? And I'd be like, okay, yeah, I did something to the kick. And I would go back and I would probably, give that sustain back, but it didn't seem it seemed like it works really well. It's got to feel right with the kick and the bass, so that everything felt like it was working together, and that's a good thing. So yeah, I mean, it's like another interesting concept about all this. So it's like, if you're doing this to the kick, like, well, then why are you doing separate things to the drums? And if you look, there's a lot of it just this low mid control. Okay, and there's that mid side. And remember, low mid and mid side; those are different, mutually exclusive terms, right? We have mid side, which is dealing with the stereo image, and then we have low mid, which is the frequency spectrum, right? So here I'm using mid just in the middle channel. I'm pulling some of that low mid energy down, just balancing it back, because again, as I started limiting, that stuff started coming to the forefront. And limiting in general, not only are we dealing with the quality aspect of it, we're limiting so that it sounds good, right? We're trying to get loudness, but we want it to sound good. So we're trying to pull back that energy a little bit so that the limiting translates well. But in addition to that, we're also pulling back those low mid frequencies, because as we limit, it's like zooming in with a microscope and you start seeing the issues, or at least the issues become exaggerated. So we have to balance things back sometimes to counteract the exaggeration. So that's what's interesting. It's like sometimes when we have to make loud masters, we spend a lot of time making things loud, as opposed to just making them sound good, which is an unfortunate sort of byproduct of the loudness thing. But at the same time, we can still, when you have a good mix, you can normally get it loud and good at the same time. So, but that's a little bit why we were doing that. And then we have, so this is kind of the first instance here of mid-side compression that we've seen. I'm just going to command swag real quick. Here we go, just in case. I've had Ableton crash on me this morning, and that was not fun. Anyway, so we have mid-side compression. So you can see I put this compressor from stereo to mid-side. I took off the stereo link, so that way this top channel is the mid, the bottom channel is the sides. So if I boost this right now, you're going to hear the drums get super wide. Okay, so whatever panned information is going to be very loud all of a sudden, and you're going to feel like your head's kind of swimming a little bit. And that's, again, for another conversation about mid-side processing, but basically that's what this is doing. And you can see that I'm turning up the input of the middle channel. Essentially, I'm pushing up the middle channel, which is hitting this threshold and giving me not just volume, but a little bit of compression. So when I did that, you probably heard the drums feel like they got louder, but the only reason they felt that way is because what's in the middle, the kick and the snare, right? And potentially some like hi-hat information and stuff. But that basically was what I was going for. I was trying to take these drums that were kind of big and pretty, and I was trying to make them like knock a little bit more in the middle. So by pushing up that middle just a little bit, you can kind of achieve that. So and it looks like I got the mix wet dry at 100%. Not doing a whole lot of, that's the thing, I'm not doing a lot of compression. I want people to understand that. I'm doing this for a reason, right? I'm pushing up the mid channel more for volume, but yes, I'm getting a little compression as sort of a byproduct of that. Now, if I didn't like the way, if it sounded too compressed, I would raise the threshold, or I would do something to make it compress less, but I'm mainly getting volume by doing that. Okay, on the instrumental, which is, again, it's like, well, why are you doing this stuff on the instrumental subgroup when you have the tracks right there? Like, why don't I just control the low end? And, the way I work is basically I try to identify the issues on the individual elements, and then I try to use that balanced version, right? I've balanced these EQ elements, and now I'm going to treat all of those things as one thing. And that's sort of why it's like I had the nice balance of the kick and the bass, so I went ahead and started controlling the low frequencies a little bit. And actually, this kind of, I guess, brings us to why am I using dynamic EQ on the low frequencies? Well, just as, and you may have seen some tutorials like people using low frequency multi-band compression to control lows. And we do that because I don't want to make a cut down there. I'm not trying to just bring the bass back. I mean, I could. That's one approach that I could make to it. But this sort of moves, right? I'll hit play. Watch your ears.
Last spring was supposed to be in Italy. I know if I love you, then I gotta set you free.
So it's dynamic, right? When the bass energy hits harder, this range will reduce a little bit more. And the idea is not to cut it, it's just to balance it. It's just to even it out a little bit, because those low frequencies, again, are the things that'll really cut into your limiting and make the limiting sound, a little bit nastier. So that's why I was doing that. I didn't really think much about the attack and release times. I can adjust the release time a little bit slower, but it felt right. When things feel right, I don't overthink it. Okay, and there's more of this, more in the lows, really, not even low mid. This is low frequency balancing, right? And I'm doing a pretty big cut. 2 dB for mastering is pretty intense, but we got a lot of bass, right? That pre-master had a lot of bass to it. So now this is cool here. We have mid side, right? And I got to thank my girlfriend, who's not colorblind like I am, for correcting me that this wasn't orange, it was green. Yes, folks, I am colorblind, and I thought this was orange. So the green is the middle channel, and then you can see this other, I want to say blue or purple. She'll have to help me on that one too. But yeah, that's basically the side channel. And what's cool about this particular EQ, this Infinity EQ, this is why I'm using this as opposed to the Pro Q3, is that there's a slider that allows me to adjust in between the middle and side. So I have 100% of the mid, but 45% side. And I can basically sit here and slide it, and it just adjusts, and I just hear the depth. And try this on your own. If you have this EQ, do a really extreme cut, and then just slide this thing from middle to side and just everything in between, and you're going to hear this crazy depth kind of just shifting. And that's really what I'm doing here. I can adjust the depth within the mastering in this range, right? In the low range. Because think about it. There's stuff, okay, yeah, 50 hertz is pretty low. It's pretty low. But if there's a stereo bass, a stereo sub, a stereo 808, this is going to actually add depth to that 808 because I'm controlling the energy in the lows, in the sub, really. Yeah, it's more where it's hitting you in the chest. But I'm also balancing the width of that sub a little bit as well. That's why the side is being reduced slightly. It just felt right. That's it. I'm using my ears. I don't really have a formula for this right now. So, all right, let's close up the instrumental. Then we got the vocals. So let's talk about first. I believe initially, I didn't even touch the initial stems, which is good, or the individual stems. That's cool. Okay, so I just, there's other projects in his album that have a lot more going on in terms of vocal stems. There's a female lead vocal, and then a background vocal stem, and then his lead, and maybe his lead from the verse and his lead from the chorus. And I might go in and actually balance things a little bit so that way all of those vocals feel more balanced. But in this case, we have what appears to be, and this is what's funny, for the exact same reason that I did the drum mid-side compression, I did this for the vocals. There's just something about when the vocals are pretty, they're smooth, they're big, they're wide, and you're just trying to get a little bit more of that just mainstream record impact. That's the best way I could describe it. Just a little bit of this volume in the middle channel, right? You can see it's in mid-side mode. I got stereo link turned off. The top portion is the middle. I'm just bumping that up a little bit, and that gives me that center impact on the whole vocal subgroup. So background vocals, lead vocal stem, everything is just getting a little bit more of that center impact. Yes, it's compressing a little bit. I didn't even, adjust much there. Actually, I did. It looks like I brought this down a little bit, which means I was compressing it slightly, but I was also doing it to get that volume out of the middle channel. So that's what's going on there. Okay, and then we have a little bit of control in the high mids, which means I was hearing a little bit of harshness. Okay, a little bit of EQ goes a long way. I'm telling you, you got 0.7 dB, almost 0.8. I can hear it. and I'm doing it in the mids. Again, high mid frequencies, mid channel, right? Mid versus side. Mid channel, controlling some high mids, balancing them back a little bit, smoothing out that vocal, and it's just really giving us the depth because I'm only doing it in the middle channel as opposed to doing it stereo, right? If I just did it stereo, it's just taking it all out of the whole thing, right? Everything in the wides, everything, and I felt like the majority of that high mid energy was sort of in the middle, and I'm using the mid side part of it to get that depth, even just a little bit. Remember, the artist specifically brought up this element of depth that they were missing in their masters, and that's cool because that's something I do all the time. Like that's, I think, an essence of modern mixing and modern mastering is this element of depth, and I think just a little bit of mid-side EQ here and there is good. If you do too much, it'll get weird. But you can see everything I'm doing here is pretty subtle. So everything here is like all these things that are turned off, these are bypass. This tape plug-in, this compressor is bypass. I got MOTT on standby. I basically have a big preset I bring up with just kind of everything I would possibly use, and it's just all bypassed. Let's start from the end here. So we got our meter plug-in. I'm pretty sure we're hitting somewhere around like -8 LUFS right now. It looks like I got a little bit over -1 there. Let me just reset that. So that's going to basically be around -1 true peak. More on that. We got our short-term LUFS and our integrated LUFS. I don't really look at momentary, but primarily short-term is hitting around -8. I don't really look much at integrative, honestly. I look more at short-term. So I know we're hitting pretty good there, but again, might be a little bit under what our reference is. And honestly, we're also talking about maybe pulling the volume back a hair on the overall project. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. So that's the metering plugin. Then we got not one but 2 instances of Ozone Maximizer, which is kind of my go-to. We got the Ozone Maximizer here set to true peak with its ceiling at -1. I don't want to get too much into that, but that's basically just keeping in line some headroom for streaming services and conversion to MP3 and other codecs, other lossy codecs, and lossless codecs. But then we got some, the gain here that's being added by bringing the threshold down. Limiters have auto makeup gain. I got lucky on this, honestly, on this master, because I didn't have to really adjust release time. I didn't have to change. This is the one I like to use. I like to use the modern algorithm. Sometimes I'll change to classic. But yeah, this is giving us a lot of that volume. And then I have a second limiter that's just at 0 because I'm not trying to do anything there. This limiter is feeding into this limiter. So I'm basically, hitting 0 dB going into this guy, not clipping or anything because this is protecting it from clipping. But I am using this to help get some loudness too. The idea is I'm breaking up the work. So that way I'm not, bringing this limiter all the way down to, I don't know what it would be. I don't want to do the math right now. All right, I'll do the math. It's 9.5. There you go. So instead of bringing this down to -9.5 dB, I decided to do this partly and this one partly, and it supposedly seems to work. So I've done 1 limiter for years when I started doing 2 limiters. And actually my friend Amir, shout out to Amir, check out his music. He was the one that actually came across just sort of experimenting with that, and I was like, you know what, let me try it. And it worked. Sounded great. So more EQ, infinity EQ. Guess what? I bet you it's mid-side. Yep. There's some mid-side EQ, actually part mid, part side. This is some of that, looks like some low-mid energy. And then we got some of that low energy. Again, once we start limiting, that stuff comes to the forefront. And then we got mid-side compression. Now, this is interesting because if you were paying attention, this probably got real nasty when I started pushing it up, right? And that's something that I do sometimes. Because look, this mix, when I remember like A-Bing with the reference, and I was like, you know what, this is pretty damn close, but let me see what happens. And what I basically did was started pushing this up, started getting real loud, real distorted, and then look what I did. I pulled the mix wet dry back from 100% down to, what is this at? 9. So it's barely there. Just brought that 100% down to 0. All the distortion went away. And then just started bumping it up just a little bit just to see, like, can I get something out of this? Just a little bit of that center impact. But remember, this is on the whole master, right? Drums, vocals, instruments, everything. Whereas the other instances that we were doing it on were more just, for the drums or for the vocal stem. And that, folks, is the breakdown of what we've done here in the first, I don't know, it was probably 20 minutes or so, 30 minutes. Any questions? Because we're going to probably take another listen to this, and then we're probably going to be pretty close to done. And I'm glad that you saw that relatively quickly. What I'll actually do for you is I'll gain match my master, and I want you to hear, and I've been doing this lately, I'll bring this output down. So I'll take a gain plugin like this. It has to happen after the limiter. In fact, I prefer it to be after the meter as well, because I still want the meter to reflect all the loudness that I'm getting. But what I'll do is I'll gain this down. What I say, we're like 9 or so up. So I'll probably bring this down to like -10 or something. And then it'll probably change. But I'm going to A-B this with the pre-master. So everything's going to be quiet again, right? But we're going to hear all the limiting and all the master processing. And I might hear something in the pre-master that I like that I might adjust in the master. So I'm going to do that, and I'll give everybody a heads up before I bump this thing back up 10 dB, okay? And then we'll wrap this up for the night, okay? So let's turn my mic off. And again, things are going to get a little quieter, so you got to turn it up. Unless there's any questions. Just see if there was any random stuff on Instagram Live. All right, here we go.
Running from the lonely, head is on backwards. I can see the hindsight. Don't know that the time it ain't right, but I gotta get on this flight. You're the only one I can see as my wife. What the hell, I can't believe I lost my sight for a good woman for no reason. So selfish, baby, I can't believe it. She was everything that I ever needed. I regret not respecting you as a woman. I regret not appreciating what I had. I regret hurting every one of your feelings. All I could think about my mind a mile a minute. As I'm speeding in a Kia down on 101. I'm not sure where you're doing when you see me there. From that cliff where you throw me or leave me there. Either way, I don't know, I feel unprepared. Having slept in 2 days just to make it here. Hit the bank, up the money and the flowers, yeah. I'm in a rush trying to get to the spot. Caught a mariachi, tell him to hurry before she arrives. Running from the lonely, head is on backwards. I can see the hindsight. Don't know that the time it ain't right, but I gotta get on this flight. You're the only one I can see as my wife. What the heck? Head is on backwards. I can see the hindsight. Don't know that the time it ain't right, but I gotta get on this flight. It's everything that I ever needed. My wife, what the hell? I can't believe I lost my sight for a good woman for no reason. So selfish, baby, I can't believe it. She was everything that I ever needed. Hey, I regret not respecting you a mile a minute. As I'm speeding in a Kia down on 101. Hit the bank, up the money and the flowers. Yeah, I know what she's gonna say, but please listen carefully. This is me telling the truth, air it out for the world to see. Running from the lonely, hates me, lonely. My past, you can't look in the eye without tears falling by her side. Say I wanted freedom, but what's really freedom when I've been caught lying and cheating and killing? The feeling of love, nothing can heal it. The wounds I've inflicted, ask God for forgiveness, but that don't heal wounds that I've cut in my victim. Kristen, my lover, now that shit is history. Say I wanted freedom, but what's really freedom when I've been caught lying and cheating and killing? The feeling of love, nothing can heal it. The wounds I've inflicted, ask God for forgiveness, but that don't heal my wife. What the hell, I can't believe I lost my sight for her. I don't deserve her, honestly I don't deserve her. She was an angel and I was a demon undercover. Living in a moment, running from the lonely. For no reason, so selfish, baby, I can't believe it. She was everything that I ever needed. Hey, I regret not respecting you as a woman. I regret not appreciating what I had. I regret hurting every one of your feelings. All I could think about my mind a mile a minute. As I don't heal wounds that I've cut in my victim. Kristen, my lover, now that shit is history. I don't deserve her, honestly I don't deserve her. She was an angel and I was a demon undercover. Living in a moment, a minute. As I'm speeding in a Kia down on heal wounds that I've cut in my victim. Kristen, my lover, now that shit is history. I don't deserve her, honestly I don't deserve her. She was an angel and I was a demon undercover. A minute. As I'm speeding in a Kia down on 101. I love, Nothing can heal it. The wounds I've inflicted, ask God for forgiveness, but that don't heal wounds that I've cut in my victim. Kristen, my lover, now that shit is history. I don't deserve it. Honestly, I don't deserve it. She was born when you see me there. From that cliff where you throw me or leave me there. Either way, I don't know. I feel unprepared. Having when you see me there. From that cliff where you throw me or leave me there. Either way.
Okay, watch your ears. Volume's going to go back up. And then, Willie, I'll get your question.
When you see me there, from that cliff where you throw me or leave me there. Either way, I don't know, I feel unprepared. Give you space so you get here. Hit the I don't wanna. She might think I'm crazy. Last spring we're supposed to be in Italy. I know if I love you then I gotta set you free. And if change gon' come then it starts with me. Yeah, there she go, to Cali. All new friends, all new scene. Cut me off, she blocked my phone. Yeah, she hates me. Lonely, yet sweet, I need to be alone again.
Cool. All right. Yeah, Willie, the saturation in this case was done in the mix. Any saturation that you hear was done in the mix. I don't know exactly what. I mean, normally like kick, 808, things like that, vocals probably have some saturation. Saturation also will come in the form of compression. Like this compressor that I use definitely adds like natural saturation, sometimes too much. But let's real quick, let's just talk about what I just did. So I actually heard, I don't know if you all heard this, but there was a inconsistency in the vocal in this section here versus the rest of the song. It was a little thinner, a little bit more high mids. I was like, you know what? I came in here, I started doing this to the vocal stem. That's why I pulled this back a little bit, and then I was like, wait a minute, that worked really well. As I jumped over here, and I went back, and I was like, wait, no, that sounds different. So just cutting the audio, not trying to create any errors. If I play through this, there won't be any clicks or pops. If you look, Ableton does like a little fade there. So that helps out. And then, so basically I was just tone balancing the vocals to each other. So, and what's really cool about this stuff is like, look, it's like 0.6 dB, 0.6 dB, 0.6 dB reduction, 0.6 dB adding. So taking a little bit of the harshness out there. Up top is actually more, a dB and a half. So you got a dB and a half taken off the top. And that's just like, it's how we have low energy, right? There's low energy that like floats around everywhere and kind of like, I call it mechanical energy. It's like non-musical. Same thing in the high end. You can get this stuff that just like, it just feels raspy and just kind of hurts and serves no purpose. And it might sound like the recording was done either at a different time or like the gain structure was different on the preamp or whatever, but it feels a little harsher to me. So by rolling off some of those highs, I'm not dulling it. Again, it's like you're balancing the frequencies. We're not making this sounding dark. We're just ducking back this high stuff a little bit so it's more balanced, right? So this teeny little cut here, this little reduction here helped with the harshness in the high mids, and then bumping up a little bit of this like 700 hertz. My friend would hate me because he says he hates 700 hertz. But this actually brings up the smoothness in this vocal. It's not good. I'm not saying turn up 700 hertz on every vocal. No, this one particular vocal on this particular master, this 700 hertz, just like a little over half a dB of it sounded good. Plain and simple. Okay, it sounded smooth. Gave it a little volume. It was like a pretty frequency. And then a little bit here, I kind of liked it, so I added a little bit more. Actually, it's about the same amount. And because this vocal was naturally dark, a little bit smoother anyway, I didn't have to do the high, I didn't have to reduce anything in the highs or the high mids. So listening for those inconsistencies is sort of an added thing with this. Same thing in mixing, right? Like if your two verses sound different, you're going to have a track with your verse 1, a track with your verse 2, and you're going to process them so that they sound similar if that's the goal, or differently if that's the goal, but that's sort of what's happening here.